like to welcome you to our ADAO Remembrance Brunch, which I think you'll find not sad, but connecting and touching and inspirational. And Sherry leads a very, very beautiful, moving part of the Remembrance Brunch. I'd like to take a brief opportunity for those of you who may have missed yesterday's messages of gratitude. This conference came together by a lot of different help in time and money. And again, we would like to thank International Ban Asbestos Secretariat and Carmanos for all that they did, being partners. And also, I don't see Terry Lynch this morning, but the Insulator Union and Sari's here from the Canadian Auto Workers Union and HG and Fujiribo. It takes a lot of money to put on a conference like this, especially to have it videotaped by Sue Ann Taylor's team to make this a legacy conference. The law firms have done us just such great stuff for ADAO, and as educational sponsors, they do not fund our organizational administrative efforts, but they do allow us to put on this conference, and we have 3 sponsors that you can take a look. Steve Kazin came down yesterday. Simmons Cooper had a group of folks, and Roger Worthington's office was also represented yesterday. This morning's event is being hosted by the John McNamara Foundation, and T.C. McNamara will spend a few minutes this morning after Sherry's presentation to talk about her foundation that she began out of loving memory for her husband. And Paul and Michelle, we want to thank you for sponsoring yesterday's lunch. It is an honor for me to introduce you to somebody who is remarkable on many different levels. Dr. Freddie Siegel-Gadan is the founding board member for ADAO, and that would be enough for most people, just to be a founding board member. But I'm going to call her Freddie. Freddie was the sister Alan never had. She's a physician assistant, and she was the person I refer to in my speech as a second advocate that came with us on doctor's appointments to help me understand and clarify things in the moment of panic. She's a true friend, a true humanitarian, and a great advocate for ADAO, so it's with pleasure I welcome Freddie Siegel-Gadan.
So I would kind of call this the Linda Reinstein fan club. Yeah. So it's really an honor to be here this morning. So I would say I do have a PhD. That's why you can call me doctor, so I'm not misrepresenting myself. It's a pleasure to be here as a member of the board of directors of ADAO, to welcome you to this Remembrance Brunch, and to thank each of you for being part of this amazing conference and organization. This is a time to remember, to reflect, to take note of the individuals we know personally and the thousands we don't, who've been ravaged by this deadly but preventable health problems associated with asbestos. As I stand here, I really honor the memory of the founding force behind ADAO, Alan Reinstein, and know he's smiling at what has been accomplished in his name and the spirit of him and the other victims. Many of you in this room know individually, and who have come together to work together in their honor. I welcome and thank you all for coming to our community, for coming together from near and far to participate in this 5th annual ADAO conference. I know for Linda and for her daughter Emily, and for those of us who have worked with her since the birth of ADAO, to have this meeting here in California in our own backyard is really very, very special. As a medical professional these days, one's required to disclose any relationships that might bias one's perspective. So I need to disclose I have no conflict of interest with ADAO. Although I work in healthcare, I don't work in occupational health or in pulmonary medicine or in any area directly connected with asbestosis. I receive state and federal monies to support the work I do, but it's in geriatric medicine, specifically in chronic disease and dementia care. I did have some experience early in my career with asbestos-related diseases when the practice I worked here in Los Angeles in early the 1980s was hired to do medical evaluations of employees of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company when that company was closing down. Many of the men had abnormal lung function, some abnormal x-rays, which the company attributed to cigarette smoking, but which on evaluation was in a number of cases found to be more than and different from the conditions you see with cigarette smoking, and would eventually be diagnosed with mesothelioma. That was my first experience with the disease. Many of their wives who didn't smoke also had respiratory problems, and a number of them also were diagnosed with mesothelioma. So, sound familiar? Then 25 years ago, we already knew about the long-term problems associated and harms of asbestos exposure. And I learned that this was largely due to work from the shipyard workers in the Navy. We knew then in the early 80s what the cause of these diseases were and how to prevent them. And I was enraged then, and I remain so. Knowledge is supposed to be power. Knowledge is supposed to lead to change. But with this knowledge, little has changed over decades. But today I'm hopeful due to the efforts of many of you in this room and beyond this room, to ADAO and the other organizations who have come together to finally, hopefully, change things, finally and slowly. Almost 5 years ago, Linda and Alan approached me and asked if I'd be willing to help them with an organization they were starting, to help others with mesothelioma and to make mesothelioma, asbestosis, and other asbestos-related diseases a part of history. They had a plan. They would bring together victims, patients, and families of asbestos exposure with clinicians, researchers, and whoever else wanted to join them and work together. They would try to make the confusion and frustration they experienced in getting a diagnosis, in getting care, but more importantly, getting information easier for others. Their ultimate goal, they told me, was very simple: to provide a network of support for patients and families and to work towards total abolishment of the use of asbestos. Innocently and somewhat naively, I said, sure, more than willing to help you any way I can. When Linda asks, everybody says this. I don't think any of us knew, in fact, and I'm sure none of us did, what the path would be like that would lead from there to today. Certainly, they had no idea of the relationships and bonds that would be formed among many of you in this room. For many of you here today, this has and continues to be a labor of love and of heartache, of accomplishments and disappointment, of progress and setbacks, big and small, that resulted in ADAO becoming a national and international force in shining light on asbestos and the hidden scourge of the modern world that this element produces. From the first ADAO Asbestos Awareness Day in 2005 to this weekend's meeting, in 5 short years, it has been truly remarkable to watch what the vision and determination of a small and growing group of people has been able to do. I marvel at the community that ADAO has brought together and formed, ever inclusive and expanding, that reaches beyond medicine and borders, that now includes union representatives, workers, lawyers, politicians, legislators, filmmakers, and others across the country and around the world. Personally, I find it very inspiring, and I believe it's a unique model of what can be done when you are fighting for what is right, just, and honest. The need to prevent what we cannot treat very well and cannot cure must continue to be the goal of ADAO and other organizations. Legislators have taken notice, and yesterday Senator Boxer spoke with encouragement to keep up the battle to improve care and promised to work to ban asbestos. ADAO will work to hold her to this promise, as I hope each of you will. You have heard from renowned researchers and clinicians about the state of the science and care. From overseas, we have been privileged to hear perspectives from England, South Africa, Germany, and India. And we're treated from music from the heart of a loving son and father, Jordan Divan. Quite a jam-packed program, I must say, for just one day. So whenever I attend a medical meeting, I count the time and the money well spent if I leave with 2 or 3 pearls. New ideas or information that change the way I think about something, the way I approach a problem, how I diagnose or treat a condition. In addition to that, and often more important, I look forward to meeting someone new, making a new connection that might develop into a collegial relationship, a shared research partner, or maybe the start of a new friendship. Sometimes it's a speaker who's been particularly inspiring. Sometimes it's a friend of a friend or a colleague, and sometimes it's someone I meet just sitting at the bar or at the luncheon table. I hope each of you have found 1 or 2 pearls from the meeting to take home with you, and you've been inspired by a speaker, met someone new that you will develop a further ongoing relationship with, be it personal or professional, or deepen an existing relationship. I hope you had a chance to enjoy and explore our lovely town of Manhattan Beach a little, to enjoy some California sunshine, at least yesterday, and maybe even take a walk on the beach, that you leave here inspired, reinvigorated, and committed to continue to the work that needs to be done so that one day the story of asbestos-related health problems will be relegated to history and a footnote in history. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a very special woman in our community, the newly inaugurated Mayor of Manhattan Beach, Portia Cohen.
Good morning. I'm going to lay my papers down here and hope that I don't touch any buttons. I am honored to speak before you, the victims, the families, the friends, the advocates and educators of human health harms caused by asbestos. I was asked to speak today in my capacity as a policymaker, an environmental protection lawyer, and as a friend. And allow me to share with you a story of a special friendship. Guess who with? I had the great pleasure of meeting Linda Reinstein back in 2002 when she and I had both joined a local city leadership group. The focus of the class was to introduce students to the workings of city government and to prepare students to be effective leaders in both the public and the private sectors. For 9 months, Linda and I toiled together with our classmates, learning the politics of small-scale decision-making and the idiosyncrasies of movers and shakers. And Linda was a mover and a shaker from the get-go. Her natural muckraking and advocacy skills surfaced quite quickly, and she soon became a trusted advisor to all those in her class. She and I bonded naturally during those days, and our friendship has only grown stronger throughout the years. Now, less than a year following our graduation from leadership class, in 2003, Linda and I found ourselves again on a mutual mission, but far different from our class days. The mission would call for a kind of leadership from Linda that I would not have to summon, at least not to this day. What happened was this. Our husbands, Andy and Alan, had met during the time that Linda and I were classmates. And when they first met, each man enjoyed good health, so we thought. Then one summer day in 2003, the four of us would bump into each other at Cedars-Sinai's hospital, not in Manhattan Beach. Both of our fellow husbands had in common the same symptom, a nagging, persistent cough that drove their wives crazy. And it took Linda and I to finally get these guys to the doctor. I mean, this cough was legendary in the home, was it not? And there we all were, completely coincidental in Cedars-Sinai together. And the irony of this coincidence of sight and symptoms is that my husband was first misdiagnosed with a fatal disease. He is still alive today. He was misdiagnosed with lung lymphoma. And Alan, too, was misdiagnosed with an idiopathic condition. Eventually, Andy and Alan were accurately diagnosed and their fates transposed. Each had a rare condition. My husband, Andy, has sarcoidosis. Has anyone heard of that besides Dr. Sagan? Of course, the Surgeon General of the U.S. Actually, I'm glad I remembered you were in the audience, because if you didn't raise your hand, no. And Alan, as we know, with mesothelioma. The twist of fate was that the sarcoidosis has not been fatal for Andy so far. Alan's fate, as we know it, is quite different. Now, I had already known, as we all do, that Linda was a natural leader. But it was not until this fate had struck her husband, Alan, that Linda's full strength and constitution revealed themselves. As Alan's illness progressed, Linda would take him out of the house, down to the Pacific Ocean of our little city, Manhattan Beach, to offer him the best breath of ocean oxygen that he could inhale, and the views to distract him from what was going on in his body, no doubt. And I would also see Linda and Alan on the weekends at our local bagel shop. Linda would fetch bagels while Alan sat outside the shop amongst the local gathering of folks that always appeared. And it seemed to me, and probably most observers, that Alan strived valiantly in an attempt to realize some pleasure from the atmosphere and the food. But to those of us in silent and heart-wrenching observation, Alan's physical suffering bore clear on his body and his face, and he was fading. I have goosebumps thinking about this. A particularly special person who displayed amazing grace is sitting here today. At such a young age, the beloved daughter of Linda and Alan, Emily. Emily was only 10 years of age when she learned that her father had a certain type of cancer. And at that age, she understandably could not pronounce the name of this odd disease, mesothelioma, let alone understand how her father developed it, what it would eventually do to him, and ultimately to her and her mother. Near the end of Alan's life, Emily and Linda would take Alan back down to the beach, this time with his wheelchair and his oxygen tank. And they'd often bring a friend, Freddie, and other wonderful people in our community. And they would all together push Alan along our strand, which is the equivalent of a boardwalk for those of you who are not locals, so that he could take in the beauty of the horizon and feel the breath of the ocean on his face. And here was a daughter and a wife pushing along a man who had served as their source of strength for so long. And those of us who know Alan know the source of strength he was. There was an irony to this, the full circle of life, and there was a beauty to it, of course. Through it all, Linda kept her chin up and her wits about her as Alan faded from her life and life itself. When he passed, Linda revealed the pain and anguish that she had protected him against. But as you all know, Linda did something with that anguish to help victims and to prevent more victims, and she has channeled her anguish into the public domain. Linda and Alan's co-creation of ADAO in 2004 to educate, prevent, protect, and advocate for the eradication of asbestos for the benefit of all human beings around the world is Linda's means of redemption. Her creation and her investment and her passionate devotion to ADAO exemplify a depth of leadership that few of us will ever be called to muster. And we salute you for that, Linda. Linda has worked steadfast in Washington and internationally, not only to educate, to propose and support laws that both compensate victims and their loved ones for asbestos-related illnesses, and importantly, to prevent new victims from exposure. And while she and you and others have made great strides, there is still vast amounts of dangerous asbestos around the globe, and our work is not done. Now, as a local policymaker and a lawyer who spent years advocating for environmental policies to protect human health, I know that legislation is critical to asbestos protection and eradication. And correct me if I am wrong, because I'm standing here with more expertise than I will ever have, but the United States has not completely banned asbestos. Products containing up to 1% of weighted asbestos are still legal. Also, penalties for the violation of asbestos laws have been insufficiently effective, as I understand it. Currently, the House and Senate have yet to achieve a reconciliation of two bills that are vastly different, as I understand it. And internationally, the situation is more grave, especially in developing nations. And I think you must have focused a good deal of your time, this conference, on that issue. But I believe in the power of a local grassroots movement. And just as an example, the United States under the Bush administration chose not to adopt the Kyoto Climate Protection Protocol. And so Mayor Nichols of Seattle, Washington decided a handful of years ago to craft a proclamation for municipalities. And Seattle was the first to adopt an actual dedicated program to reduce CO2 and other greenhouse gases in Seattle. Manhattan Beach joined in 2006. Hundreds of cities around the world have. And now the pressure's moving up, and it's going to happen nationally, it's going to happen internationally. And I think we can approach asbestos locally simultaneous with our national and international policy pressures. So I am dedicated to doing that. And what I am going to propose to do is to introduce to my city council a proclamation entitled Swap the Rock. And Linda educated me about this, and though it's symbolic on the face of it, it is educational, and it will start the awareness of how ubiquitous this problem is, and I think it will help the cause. So let me tell you a little bit about this. California ranks 5th in the nation with the highest recorded number of asbestos-related deaths. Despite this alarming statistic, the California state rock is serpentine, which is a beautiful rock. It is the host of asbestos, however. How this came to be? Lobbying, of course. In 1965, serpentine was designated as the state rock in order to promote the lucrative asbestos mining industry. The time for change has come. ADAO, the John McNamara Foundation, and the Pacific Heart and Lung Blood Institute have joined forces in a united effort to change the California state rock from serpentine to a non-lethal rock. I will introduce to the City of Manhattan Beach the Swap the Rock proclamation, and it is my hope that the City of Manhattan Beach will join and support your mission. Closing, I just want to thank you for choosing the City of Manhattan Beach to host this important conference and bring awareness locally. And on behalf of the City of Manhattan Beach, we salute you, ADAO, and your advocates, and in particular, my dear friend and your friend, Linda Reinstein. Thank you. I'd like to call Linda up because we have two important letters and proclamations from our United States Senator Dianne Feinstein. I will read this proclamation from Congresswoman Jane Harman, and then I will give it to Linda and we can do some photo. Just can't take this off here. This is a certificate of congressional commendation presented to the Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization in honor of your 5th Annual International Asbestos Awareness Conference and in recognition of your outstanding support of asbestos education and dedication to fighting asbestos-related diseases throughout the global community. I will not read all of this, but this too is a proclamation and commendation giving the same message from our United States Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Thank you so much, Mayor Cohen. Thank you for joining the campaign that TC and her girls started a year ago, that we hope that by joining forces that together change is truly possible, and with the city's effort. And I know that everybody's minds are percolating. Now my city, my city. So draft it, we'll template it, and launch it. And let's hope other folks just get on board. So thank you, Mayor Cohen. This is a really special time, and this is why we're here. And you may see tears, or you may just feel tears, or you may just feel the cathartic cleansing of thinking about someone you may have lost, or how you can renew your spirit in going forward. And Sherry, this is Sherry's signature part of our conference, which she does so beautifully. So I'd like to introduce Sherry Erzinger to you now, who will start the candle lighting, which will be done literally around the world at 10:30.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Linda. This is a Remembrance Brunch, and it's time now to bring the people for whom we're here into this brunch and to convene all of those that we've loved who have been affected by asbestos disease. What I'd like you to do is select 2 people from each table, and you'll find a candle there, and you'll find a box of matches. So if 2 people could stand, and one holds the candle and the other the box of matches. Now let's get back to holding those people or that person in your mind. And let's bring a spirit of reverence into this moment. It is reverence for those people that you have personally been touched by, and reverence for those around the world who are dying with no attention, with no medical understanding of what's going on. The light of this candle reminds us of love. The light of this candle heals our grief. The light of this candle gives us courage. The light of this candle honors our memories. The light of this candle strengthens our pledge to continue. Amen.
I was asked to speak because I have the John McNamara Foundation. I don't believe it is a remembrance. I celebrate my husband. With that being said, Linda asked me to explain what my foundation does. And I'm not really sure, so I wanted to do karaoke to make this room a little bit lighter, but she vetoed that. My foundation supports all meso victims. My sentiment, of course, is for the veterans. My husband was a veteran. We have been honored to give out our 15th scholarship as of last week. We have helped 40 families. We run a hospice in our own version by letting patients come and stay at our apartment while they are getting treatment. That being said, out of this nightmare, I got to meet Linda, and we have formed a good and evil. I'll let you guess which one's which, but in everything, there's a silver cloud, and Linda is mine. That's it, I'm done.
You've seen this. I've used this when I testify. I always put this slide up, and it's the quote I use, and it's so true that one life lost to asbestos disease is tragic, but hundreds of thousands of lives lost is unconscionable. So, as you finish your breakfast and hug your friends, I really hope that you're going to come out, yes, we're thinking about it already, to Chicago next year. And, yeah, Chicago, Deb, sorry. Maybe you'll come with us. To Chicago as we advance our mission of eradicating asbestos and the diseases it's caused. I thank you all for joining us. Doug and I are really thrilled, and the ADAO volunteers for joining us for the 5th Annual Asbestos Awareness Day Conference. You've made it terrific, and we're taking the message back to Washington with bells and bowls, maybe a foghorn, Emily. She used that before as a good thing to use for the speakers who run over. But we might just take that loud message back to D.C., and we will remind them of the conference mission that we've advanced this weekend. And I thank you. We did get everyone to sign on to those 2 very important important letters that will go off to Dr. Robinson for the INCOD, as well as the Ban Asbestos letter that has so many countries and signatures. Dick's smiling. We're going to take it back to Washington. So thank you.
At this moment, we could walk away, haunted by the need to do more. We could hold each other until the need for compassion eases. At this moment, we could strengthen our resolve to walk with each other on the path to detect and treat asbestos disease and prevent exposure for a new future. See you in Chicago next year.